Mastery of Dietary, Hypocrisy, and Depletion of Physical Health. Navigating Health and Autonomy of Conditions and Circumstances, written, edited, created, and published by Nisa Pasha, Executive Political Health Guru, Peer Counselor and Educator. MentalHealthRevival.org. The cause and effects undergoing hypocrisy after mastery of dietary recovery and regeneration for mental health. Peers and consumers take on additional complexity when considered through the lens of dietary mastery, environmental conditioning, and hypocrisy in moral and value alignment. Individuals who have lived under behavioral health systems, where mandated medications, structured treatment plans, and regimented behavioral protocols govern daily routines, often experience diminished autonomy and self-regulation. These conditions are further complicated by financial pressures, restrictive housing environments, social isolation, and limited communication channels, which constrain decision-making and suppress natural self-expression. In such contexts, dietary patterns can become both a site of control and a reflection of internal moral conflict. When individuals have learned to master their food intake, regulating portions, timing, and nutritional quality, they develop conscious awareness of their bodily and ethical boundaries. However, when external systems or environmental constraints undermine this mastery through stress, imposed schedules, isolation, or enforced dependency, a form of hypocrisy emerges. The individual may maintain outward compliance with dietary guidelines, health recommendations, or social norms, yet internally experience a disconnect between knowledge, intention, and behavior. This dissonance is morally and psychologically significant. It reflects a state where the conscious self recognizes the proper course of action, but circumstances, whether systemic, environmental, or coercive, prevent the alignment of action with moral and ethical understanding. Over time, this internal contradiction depletes both physical and psychological resources. Stress hormones increase, metabolic and digestive processes are disrupted, cognitive function declines, and the ability to sustain ethical consistency in decision-making erodes. From a moral standpoint, the hypocrisy arises not from ignorance or inability, but from the tension between mastery and constraint, the conscious awareness of how one should act versus what is actually possible under systemic and environmental suppression. The result is a depletion of moral and ethical energy alongside physical health. The individual's body, brain, and moral reasoning are taxed simultaneously, shortening perceived lifespan, increasing susceptibility to illness, and undermining resilience. The intentionality that accompanies dietary mastery, self-discipline, reflection, and ethical consumption becomes weaponized by systemic pressures, creating a scenario where compliance masks internal contradiction and survival adaptations masquerade as moral alignment. In practical terms, peers in such environments experience degraded self-control, prolonged systemic conditioning, and environmental stress compromise executive function and impulse regulation. Ethical dissonance. Mastery of dietary and behavioral standards exists in theory but cannot be fully enacted, creating moral tension. Physical health depletion. Chronic stress, disrupted nutrition, and environmental limitations accelerate physiological wear, contributing to fatigue, metabolic imbalance, and reduced resilience. Psychological strain. Conscious awareness of misalignment between intention and behavior fosters guilt, anxiety, and diminished self-efficacy. Ultimately, this framework highlights that hypocrisy in dietary mastery under constrained conditions is not an ethical failing in the traditional sense, but a consequence of systemic and environmental forces that inhibit alignment of conscious moral understanding with practical action. The depletion of physical, cognitive, and moral capacity under such circumstances demonstrates the intricate interplay between agency, ethics, environment, and health, emphasizing the importance of recovery models that restore autonomy, choice, and alignment between conscience and behavior. Mastery, hypocrisy, and recovery. Navigating Health and Autonomy in Constrained Environments. Introduction. As a peer mental health counselor and educator, I often witness the complex challenges that mental health consumers face when their autonomy and self-determination have been systematically constrained. Whether through behavioral health systems, mandated medications, institutional treatment plans, correctional supervision, or restrictive housing and financial conditions, many individuals experience environments that limit meaningful choice. These constraints extend beyond the surface. They impact decision-making, self-regulation, moral reasoning, and physical health. One area that illustrates this complexity vividly is dietary mastery, when individuals have learned to regulate their eating, portions, and nutritional choices, but external pressures interfere with the alignment of conscious intention and behavior. In these scenarios, a phenomenon emerges that I describe as hypocrisy under constraint, the tension between knowing the right course of action, mastering discipline in one area, and being unable to act fully in accordance due to systemic or environmental barriers. Understanding how this tension affects mental, physical, and moral well-being is critical for consumers, peers, families, and professionals who support recovery. 1. Environmental conditioning and the loss of autonomy. Many of the individuals I work with have lived under circumstances that limit agency, mandated medications and treatment protocols that dictate daily routines, institutional and correctional supervision that restrict movement, communication, and access to resources, financial instability and housing insecurity, which force decisions based on survival rather than personal values, social marginalization and isolation, reducing meaningful engagement with supportive networks. Under these conditions, the nervous system adapts to survive. Executive functions, such as impulse control, long-term planning, and ethical reasoning, are often suppressed while the brain prioritizes immediate compliance and emotional survival. Individuals develop behaviors designed to navigate external expectations, often at the expense of internal goals, values, or ethical consistency. 2. Dietary mastery as a mirror of agency. Dietary mastery, regulating intake, understanding nutritional needs, and practicing restraint, is not merely a physical discipline. It reflects self-awareness, moral reasoning, and decision-making capacity. Achieving this level of control requires conscious reflection on choices and their consequences, self-regulation of impulses in alignment with long-term health goals, integration of ethical or moral considerations when consuming food, particularly in environments where resources are limited or controlled. However, when environmental pressures conflict with these mastered behaviors, a disconnect arises. For example, a person may know how to eat healthily or ethically, yet structural barriers, lack of access to nutritious food, rigid institutional schedules, or coercive medication effects can prevent alignment between intention and behavior. 3. Hypocrisy under constraint. In the context of mental health and recovery, hypocrisy is not simply moral failure. Instead, it is a state in which conscious awareness and intention exist, but environmental or systemic pressures prevent full alignment between behavior and values. This tension manifests in several ways: moral and ethical dissonance. Individuals are aware of the right course of action but cannot enact it. Physical health depletion. Chronic stress from constraint can disrupt digestion, immune function, sleep, and energy regulation. Psychological strain. Conscious recognition of misalignment increases guilt, anxiety, and cognitive fatigue. Identity fragmentation. When behaviors do not align with conscious moral understanding, individuals can feel disconnected from their sense of self. This form of hypocrisy differs from traditional notions of deception. It is structurally imposed and externally constrained, yet its consequences for well-being are profound. 4. Recovery and regeneration. Recovery begins when individuals regain some degree of autonomy and agency over their lives. Key elements of this process include restoration of choice, opportunities to make decisions about daily routines, diet, social interactions, and health interventions. Rebuilding self-efficacy. Experiencing the positive consequences of autonomous decision-making strengthens confidence. Stress reduction. Lowering chronic physiological stress supports sleep, digestion, immune function, and cognitive processing. Reintegration into social and community life. Restoring relationships and networks enhances emotional well-being and reinforces behavioral consistency. Importantly, regeneration is not instantaneous. It occurs gradually as individuals practice decision-making in safe and supported environments, rebuild trust in their judgment, and align action with internal values. Environmental conditioning constraints, conscience, and health. 1. Control and environmental conditioning. When a person is conditioned by their environment, whether due to living expenses, systemic constraints, institutional policies, or societal pressures, their ability to implement behaviors aligned with their desires, wants, and needs is limited. In these situations, decision-making is externally constrained. Choices about diet, work, social interaction, and self-care may be limited or directed by outside systems. Self-realization is hindered. When the environment forces specific behaviors, individuals cannot fully explore or enact their authentic goals, values, or talents. Internal conflict arises. A person may recognize their needs and desires but feel unable to act, leading to stress, cognitive dissonance, and diminished well-being. This reflects a dynamic of constrained agency, where capacity for autonomous decision-making is reduced by structural or systemic factors rather than personal failings. 2. Biblical perspective on imprisonment and lack of condemnation. The Bible consistently distinguishes confinement from moral failure. General principle, Scripture emphasizes that God evaluates intent and heart, not circumstances outside one's control. Application to mental health systems. Mandated treatment, institutionalization, and enforced medication can be understood as modern equivalents of confinement or coercion. Biblical principles suggest that being compelled to act by systems beyond your control does not equate to moral condemnation. Ethical evaluation depends on capacity, awareness, and intent, not on the mere fact of external constraint. 3. Recovery modules. Regeneration and health recovery models in mental health emphasize the restoration of agency, autonomy, and self-realization, particularly after experiences of constraint. Their effects on health include a regeneration of health, restoration of autonomy. Regaining decision-making power reduces stress and cortisol levels, supporting mental and physical health. Rebuilding self-realization. Recovery modules that focus on goal setting, skill development, and self-reflection help individuals reconnect with personal desires and needs, fostering resilience. Neurobiological repair. Structured recovery interventions can improve executive functioning, emotional regulation, and cognitive coherence over time. B. Depletion of health under constraint. Prolonged external control, without recovery support, leads to physiological and psychological strain. Chronic cognitive dissonance. When one's values, desires, or intentions are continually suppressed, it activates stress pathways, reduces sleep quality, and impairs digestion and immunity. Spiritual and moral fatigue. Even if not morally culpable, individuals may experience internal tension or self-doubt, which can mimic the effects of hypocrisy but without ethical fault. 4. Recovery modules and hypocrisy from a peer mental health perspective. True hypocrisy requires voluntary contradiction, knowing the right course of action, and deliberately choosing otherwise. In constrained environments, behaviors that appear misaligned with personal values are not hypocrisy because capacity and freedom are compromised. Recovery modules work to reestablish alignment between intention and behavior. By gradually restoring autonomy, individuals can act consistently with their conscience, reducing the internal strain caused by external restriction. Key point: recovery reduces depletion by restoring agency and self-alignment, but failure to provide recovery opportunities prolongs physiological and psychological stress, which may mimic the effects of ethical conflict. Peers, professionals, and families comprehension components. Understanding the interaction between dietary mastery, environmental conditioning, and hypocrisy has practical relevance. For peers and consumers, recognize that tension between intention and behavior under systemic constraints is normal and not a reflection of moral failure. Celebrate incremental gains in autonomy and decision-making. For professionals, design interventions that enhance agency, provide flexible supports, and reduce structural barriers to ethical and healthy behavior. For families and support networks, reinforce autonomy, acknowledge survival adaptations, and provide environments that allow for safe practice of independent choices. Concluding thoughts: living under environmental and systemic constraints can suppress agency, compromise moral and ethical alignment, and deplete physical and psychological health. Dietary mastery offers a window into these dynamics, highlighting how internal discipline interacts with external pressures. Recovery and regeneration occur when individuals regain control over choices, rebuild self-efficacy, and align behavior with conscious moral and ethical understanding. This process restores integrity, resilience, and vitality, demonstrating that true mastery lies not in compliance alone, but in the alignment of awareness, intention, and action. Pure takeaway constraint is not moral failure. Adapting to survival conditions is evidence of resilience, not weakness. Autonomy restores health. Physical, psychological, and ethical well-being improve when decision-making is reclaimed. Recovery is incremental. Gradually exercising choice and aligning behavior with values rebuilds self-efficacy. Support systems matter. Peers, professionals, and families are essential in creating environments that enable autonomy. Celebrate progress. Every choice made with conscious intention strengthens resilience and fosters holistic recovery. Motivational message to peers: to every peer navigating these challenges, your struggle is not a reflection of weakness or failure. Survival adaptations under constraint are evidence of resilience. Mastery of your diet, your decisions, and your ethical choices is powerful, and even incremental progress is meaningful. Understand that your body and mind respond to the alignment between intention and action. The knowledge of right and wrong, applied consciously in your daily life, protects your physical health, preserves your energy, and strengthens your lifespan, even in a world full of pressures and limitations. Each intentional choice, no matter how small, is a victory for self-realization, autonomy, and holistic well-being. Wake up to the power you hold in reclaiming control, making conscious choices, and honoring your health as an integrated reflection of your values. If you have specific questions or concerns, feel free to share. Hope you found this insightful while grasping the key components. Please contact me if you would like to chat in a peer counseling session revolving around this post or another topic. Mental health revival, seeking to inspire a unique perception of mental health awareness and harm reduction.